Do you really think Hamilton was just 5th in Mexico practices? If we look only at the times, it may seem like a mediocre result. But what if I told you that that 5th place hides one of the most complex and solid performances of the entire season? Stay, because today we are going to unearth what no one showed you about the British driver at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. The day of Friday, October 24th at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez seemed, on the surface, just another one on the calendar. Max Verstappen led the table with a lap of 1 minute and 17.392 seconds, and the media quickly hailed him as untouchable at the Mexican altitude. Meanwhile, a 5th place for Lewis Hamilton went almost unnoticed, 3/10 behind. One more fact, a correct performance, many would say, but that reading is superficial, incomplete, and deeply unfair if analyzed under the proper magnifying glass. While the other drivers took advantage of FP1 to learn about the evolution of the circuit, work with their engineers, adjust settings, and gain sensations from the first lap, Hamilton watched from the garage. In his place, Antonio Fuoco took charge of the wheel as part of the FIA-mandated rookie program. The Briton could not ride a single lap in that session. And when he finally got into the car in FP2, he had exactly 1 hour to do everything. Understand the grip of the asphalt, the particularities of the thin air of Mexico City, the behavior of a Ferrari that does not forgive setup errors, and also set a competitive time. And yet, despite being at a disadvantage, he finished just 3/10 off the best time of the entire day. He surpasses Charles Leclerc in several phases of the long stint. And most importantly, it provides key data to the team in record time. That's not 5th place. That is a clear message to the entire paddock. Hamilton's level of adaptation is years ahead of average. Because behind each sector he visited in that compressed hour of practice, there were surgical decisions, braking adjustments, changes in differential configuration, balance modifications adapted live. And he achieved all this without errors in a car that was still temperamental, on a track that was critical due to its altitude. The most ironic thing is that outside the paddock, that history is lost. It becomes a cold table of times. A 5th place that seems irrelevant in the context of the season. But for those who know how to read between the lines, for those who understand the silent language of performance in F1, Hamilton in Mexico was a true masterclass compressed into 60 minutes. This is the difference between the average driver and a champion with 7 crowns. The ability to extract 98% of the car under extreme pressure, without prior warm-up, and in an environment that demands perfection from the first corner. Talking about the Mexican Grand Prix without talking about the altitude is like analyzing chess without considering the rules. It is ignoring the most determining context of the weekend. Because Mexico City is not just another challenge on the calendar. It is, without exaggeration, an extreme laboratory for Formula One. Located at 2,285 meters above sea level, the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez forces all the fundamentals of the car to adapt to a new paradigm. The air is 25% less dense. And that simple statistic has repercussions that ripple throughout the car's performance. Let's start with the most obvious. The loss of aerodynamic load. At that altitude, the airflow passing through the ailerons and the flat bottom loses effectiveness. In real numbers, the teams estimate a drop of up to 15% in downforce generation. That means that a car that normally sticks to the asphalt like a magnet here floats. Literally, the adhesion disappears. And to counteract this, all teams set up maximum downforce configurations, the same ones they would use in Monaco. Only there is one detail. In Mexico City, despite that extreme configuration, the cars reach top speeds similar to Monza. Because drag also drops with altitude. The car goes fast, but without control. This is where the technical dilemma comes in. More load means more resistance, which usually penalizes on straight lines. But in Mexico, that penalty disappears. And what remains is a car that seems to go on ice in the curves, with stability that is brutally difficult to achieve. It doesn't matter how good the car is on normal circuits. In Mexico, start from scratch. And here, the adaptability of the pilot becomes decisive. Ferrari knew it. That's why they didn't save anything. The SF-25 arrived in Mexico with a specific cooling configuration. Enlarged grills, more vents in the side pods, additional openings in the engine cover. Everything to avoid overheating. Because yes, despite the colder air and less dense environment, the cooling system works less efficiently. There is less oxygen to cool the engine, MGUH, brakes and radiators. A lethal technical cocktail if not managed well. And here is a crucial point. Every time a team opens the bodywork to improve ventilation, they are sacrificing aerodynamics. You are throwing away efficiency points out of necessity. Ferrari did it, and not for pleasure but for survival. They knew that a thermal failure could ruin the entire weekend. So the SF25 that Hamilton drove in Mexico wasn't just a machine under pressure. It was a machine that ran with technical crutches, with more drag, with less efficiency, and in critical conditions. But it doesn't stop there. Thin air also affects the power unit. The internal combustion engine loses power naturally. Less oxygen, less explosion, less thrust. So how do you compensate? The MGUH, the system responsible for compressing air through the turbocharger, has to work much harder. And that generates more heat, more wear, more demand. And who is in charge of dealing with all that, of translating every anomaly on the track into useful feedback? The pilot. During his hour of practice, Hamilton didn't just drive. He was an engineer, he was an evaluator, he was a human thermometer of the SF25. Each lap gave him information that not only served to adjust settings, but also to protect the car from itself. Because in conditions like those in Mexico, the car becomes its worst enemy. And as if that were not enough, we must add the particularity of the Ferrari 2025, a car sensitive to ride height with a very narrow operating window. This means that even with a perfect setup, any irregularity on the asphalt can take the car out of its optimal zone. And in Mexico, where the track is more aggressive than it seems, maintaining that window is an art. Fred Vasseur acknowledged it weeks ago. They froze development too soon. There are no new parts. There is no room for improvement. What they have is what there is. And that makes every adjustment, every lap, every data collected by a driver like Hamilton pure gold for the team. When you look at a timesheet, everything seems clear. Numbers, positions, stopwatches. But Formula One has never been a sport of cold data. It is an art, a science, a complex symphony of interlocking factors. And to truly understand the value of Hamilton's performance in Mexican GP practice, you have to read between the lines, dismantle the numbers, reinterpret the result. Because that fifth place, so easily dismissed by many, hides a much more powerful truth. To begin with, the layout of the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is not a homogeneous one. It is not a flat or uniform circuit. It is divided into three sectors that demand completely different things from the car and the driver. And when you break it down sector by sector, Hamilton becomes even more impressive. The first sector starts with the longest straight on the calendar. A straight that in normal conditions would reward the most efficient car at top speed. But in Mexico, that benefit is distorted by altitude. What matters here is having perfect balance when braking into turn 1, a corner that is taken at more than 330 kilometers per hour, and that requires surgical precision. And Hamilton, without having ridden in FP1, managed to position himself among the fastest in the speed trap. But what is really surprising is that it did so without sacrificing braking stability or exit traction. In a car as sensitive as the SF25, achieving that without error is a technical feat. In the second sector, things change completely. Here the straight lines disappear and the linked curves appear. A stretch where precision, sensitivity behind the wheel and reading the track make the difference. It is the area where the car suffers the most if it is outside its operating window. And there, on that fragment of the track that causes so many errors, Hamilton was the most consistent. Each lap he took was a copy of the previous one with a difference of just thousandths. That consistency is an unmistakable sign that he was dominating the car, not surviving in it. And then there is the third sector, the stadium. A technical, slow area with tight curves where the engine is no longer the protagonist and the chassis is everything. The worst for the SF25 is combined here. Temperature, lack of grip, low-speed corners. And yet Hamilton kept his time. He held it lap after lap. No oversteering, no blocking, no lack of control. While others lost half a second in that sector alone, he closed the gap. All of this is even more extraordinary when you consider that this was Hamilton's first time piloting the SF25 in Mexico. He had no previous references. He had no personal information. Every sensation was new. Each curve was an exam. And he approved it with flying colors. During that single hour of practice, Hamilton didn't just set times, rewrote expectations. It gave Ferrari confidence that the car could perform in extreme conditions. He showed the paddock that he is still a real threat. And he made it clear that his adaptation to the team will not be a process of months. It's already happening. Silent, efficient, lethal. It's easy to underestimate a performance when judging by numbers alone. 5th place in a free practice. 3/10 behind the leader. Nothing out of the ordinary. But that way of seeing Formula One is what prevents you from understanding the layers that make this sport great. Because what Lewis Hamilton did in practice for the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix was not a simple adaptation session. It was a silent demonstration of mastery in one of the most unforgiving stages on the calendar. Hamilton had less preparation, less track time, and a car that historically has proven to be temperamental in extreme conditions. And yet, he not only rose to the challenge, he went further. He adapted his driving style. He performed a single track. He understood the physics of an environment that punishes every inaccuracy. And he managed to build, in just 1 hour, a base that others cannot achieve even in 2 full days of activity. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.